The scent of pine trees and mountain air still lingered in the Wyoming wilderness when investigators discovered the remains on September 19th, 2021. For Gabrielle Venora Petito, a 22-year-old from Blue Point, New York, with dreams of becoming a travel influencer, that crisp mountain atmosphere would be the last she'd ever experience. In the remote stretches of the Bridger-Teton National Forest, a crime would unfold that would captivate the nation and expose a deadly pattern hidden beneath the facade of a perfect road trip romance. This is the story of how digital footprints, forensic evidence, and a mother's instinct would reveal a truth that Brian Laundrie spent his final days trying to conceal. Gabby Petito wasn't just another 22-year-old dreaming of adventure. She was known for her infectious smile that could light up any room, her determination that never wavered even when others doubted her, and her peculiar habit of organizing everything in color-coded lists. Friends remember how she'd spend hours perfecting her photography, adjusting angles until the light hit just right, determined to capture moments that felt authentic rather than staged. Her younger siblings adored her. As the oldest of 7 children in her blended family, she'd braid her little sister's hair every Sunday morning while playing their favorite songs, creating rituals that made each of them feel special. Just 3 months before late August 2021, Gabby had worked double shifts at Taco Bell and as a pharmacy technician, saving every dollar for the cross-country adventure she'd been planning for 2 years. Her mother, Nicole Schmidt, recalls the last normal conversation they had in early August when Gabby's voice bubbled with excitement about visiting national parks and building her YouTube channel, Nomadic Statik. She told me, "Mom, this is going to be the start of everything. I'm going to show people that you can chase your dreams no matter what anyone says." Nicole remembers, her voice catching on the memory. On August 10th, 2021, Gabby had posted a cheerful video on Instagram showing her white 2012 Ford Transit van. Decorated with fairy lights and succulents, her face radiant as she stood in front of a Utah landscape, no one watching that video could have known that in just 17 days, everything would unravel. The August heat shimmered off the asphalt near Arches National Park on August 12th, 2021, when Moab City Police received a 911 call about a domestic disturbance involving a white van and a couple arguing. At approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, officers pulled over the vehicle and found Gabby visibly distraught, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she tried to explain what had happened. She told officers they'd been fighting about her obsessive-compulsive tendencies and Brian's criticism of her travel blog dreams. The Bodycam footage captured her anxiety as she blamed herself, saying she'd been pushing him, that she got worked up too easily. Brian, calm and composed in a different police camera view, stood barefoot in the Utah dust, explaining casually that Gabby had hit him, showing scratches on his face. The officers, seeing what they interpreted as a case where Gabby was the primary aggressor, separated the couple for the night but filed no charges. Brian stayed in a hotel while Gabby slept in the van. The sound of the van door closing that night echoed with a finality no one recognized at the time. 2 weeks later, on August 24th, Gabby FaceTimed her mother from Ogden, Utah, telling her about their plans to head to Grand Teton National Park. Her voice sounded tired. Nicole would later recall, but still hopeful. The last confirmed sighting of Gabby alive came from surveillance footage at a Whole Foods in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, on August 27th. The grainy video showed her and Brian shopping together, and then she vanished into the vast wilderness of the Grand Tetons. On August 30th, Nicole received a text from Gabby's phone that read, "No service in Yosemite." Something felt wrong immediately. Gabby never called her grandfather Stan by his first name, and they weren't supposed to be anywhere near Yosemite. The phone went silent after that. No more posts, no more calls, just an eerie digital void where Gabby's constant communication had been. Special Agent in charge Michael Schneider of the FBI Denver Division received the missing persons report on September 11th, 2021, and immediately recognized this case carried unusual elements that demanded swift action. Schneider, a 28-year veteran of the Bureau who'd worked everything from organized crime to international terrorism cases, found himself drawn into what appeared to be a straightforward missing persons case that had already captured intense public attention. The situation seemed surreal from the start. Brian Laundrie had returned to his parents' home in Northport, Florida on September 1st, driving Gabby's van, but Gabby wasn't with him. For 10 days, the Laundrie family said nothing to Gabby's frantic parents, who texted and called repeatedly, begging for any information about their daughter's whereabouts. The silence from the Laundries was deafening, a wall of legal protection erected by their attorney, Stephen Bertolino, who advised the family to say nothing. Meanwhile, Gabby's mother and stepfather, Jim Schmidt, were posting desperately on social media, sharing her photos, pleading for anyone who'd seen her to come forward. The initial investigation faced immediate challenges. The crime scene, if there was one, could be anywhere across thousands of miles of cross-country travel. The victim had been out of contact for nearly 2 weeks. The primary person of interest refused to speak to investigators and had lawyered up immediately. Time was slipping away with each passing hour. Schneider assembled a team of forensic specialists, digital analysts, and search and rescue experts. They began with what they had: social media posts, witness statements, and surveillance footage from businesses along the couple's route. Amateur sleuths on TikTok and Reddit were already combing through Gabby's Instagram posts frame by frame, noting locations and timestamps. One YouTuber couple, Jen and Kyle Bethune, came forward with crucial footage. They'd been traveling through Wyoming in late August and had captured Gabby's white van on their dashcam video near the Spread Creek dispersed camping area on August 27th. The van sat alone in the wilderness, parked at an odd angle near a creek. This single piece of evidence would direct search teams to the exact area where they needed to focus. The breakthrough that investigators needed came from multiple sources converging at once. Digital forensics revealed that between August 30th and September 1st, Brian Laundrie had used Gabby's Capital One debit card to withdraw over $1,000, making transactions at ATMs as he drove her van back to Florida without her. Phone records showed the last activity on Gabby's phone was on August 27th, near Grand Teton National Park. After that date, several text messages were sent from her phone, but the timing and content appeared designed to mislead Gabby's family into thinking she was still alive and traveling. The forensic linguistics team noted the messages didn't match Gabby's typical communication patterns. She'd never called her grandfather Stan in previous messages. She'd never mentioned Yosemite as part of their planned route. Most damning of all, someone had sent these messages while systematically attempting to keep her phone powered off to avoid location tracking. Surveillance footage analysis showed Brian alone in the van at multiple gas stations between Wyoming and Florida during the first days of September. His demeanor calm, stopping for snacks and fuel as if nothing were amiss. A witness came forward describing an encounter on August 29th, when a frantic young man matching Brian's description had approached them while they were pulling into a campsite near the Snake River. The man was muddy, seemed disoriented, and offered them $200 for a ride back to Jackson, then suddenly changed his mind when they mentioned heading into the park, not to Jackson, and he jumped out of the vehicle while it was still moving. Another driver picked up a hitchhiking Brian that same day and later reported his odd behavior. He'd been insistent about the date, repeatedly mentioning it was August 29th, and when the driver mentioned seeing a van that looked abandoned near Spread Creek, Brian became agitated. These puzzle pieces painted a disturbing picture, but investigators needed physical evidence. They needed to find Gabby. On September 19th, 2021, search teams combed through the Spread Creek dispersed camping area, a remote section of wilderness accessible only by rough dirt roads, where sagebrush stretched endlessly beneath the shadow of the Grand Tetons. The early autumn chill had already begun to settle into the high elevation landscape when a search team member spotted something that didn't belong among the natural terrain. Approximately 900 feet from where the Bethune video had captured the white van, investigators discovered human remains. The scene showed signs of an attempt at concealment, the body positioned in an area slightly away from the main camping zone. Dr. Brent Blue, the Teton County coroner, would later perform a detailed autopsy that revealed Gabby had died of blunt force injuries to the head and neck combined with manual strangulation. The forensic examination indicated she'd been deceased for approximately 3 to 4 weeks, which aligned with the timeline of her last known communication on August 27th. The manner of death was ruled a homicide. There was no question this was murder. While investigators processed the scene in Wyoming, back in Florida, Brian Laundrie had vanished. His parents reported him missing on September 17th, claiming he'd left for a hike in the Carlton Reserve on September 13th and never returned. The massive T. Mabry Carlton Jr. Memorial Reserve, a sprawling 25,000-acre area of swampland, was flooded from recent heavy rains, making search efforts extraordinarily difficult. His Ford Mustang was found parked at the Myakkahatchee Creek Park entrance with a police note on the windshield. The FBI officially named Brian a person of interest and later obtained a federal arrest warrant for unauthorized use of a debit card, charging him with using Gabby's financial accounts without permission following her death. The case became a national obsession. Social media erupted with theories. Amateur detectives dissected every frame of video, and news helicopters circled above the Florida swamp searching for any sign of Brian. But the preserve's alligator-infested waters and dense vegetation made finding anyone nearly impossible. Brian Christopher Laundrie appeared to many as an unremarkable 23-year-old from Northport, Florida, a quiet young man who enjoyed hiking, reading books about nature, and sketching in journals he carried everywhere. Friends from high school remembered him as artistic but intense, someone who could be charming one moment and moody the next, prone to explosive anger when things didn't go his way. He'd met Gabby in 2019, and their relationship quickly became serious, with Gabby moving in with Brian and his parents. To outsiders scrolling through their Instagram feeds, they seemed like the perfect adventurous couple, two young people chasing freedom in a converted van. But beneath the carefully curated photos lay something darker. Text messages recovered from Gabby's phone after her death revealed a pattern that her parents hadn't fully understood while she was alive. "Don't try to control me because it only makes me mad," Gabby had written to Brian in one message. "I love you so much, but it's the way you speak to me that hurts me the most." She'd written him letters begging him to stop calling her names, to stop criticizing her dreams, to let her be herself without constant judgment. Friends later admitted they'd noticed Brian's controlling behavior, how he'd monitor her social media, how he'd dismiss her aspirations of becoming a travel blogger as unrealistic fantasies, how he'd isolate her from others during their travels. The Moab police incident on August 12th took on new significance in hindsight. What officers had interpreted as Gabby being the aggressor was actually a trauma response, a young woman so conditioned to taking blame that she'd internalized as gaslighting. Witnesses who called 911 that day had actually reported seeing Brian slapping Gabby and taking her phone. Experts in domestic violence recognized the signs immediately when the Bodycam footage went public. The scratches on Brian's face that he'd shown police were likely defensive wounds, Gabby's desperate attempt to protect herself during an argument that escalated beyond her control. What led Brian from that August afternoon confrontation to the act of murder remains something only he could fully explain, but the pattern suggested an escalation of abuse, a man who felt his control slipping as Gabby became more confident in pursuing her dreams, more willing to assert herself, more determined to build a life that didn't revolve around managing his moods and ego. Investigators pieced together those final days. After the Moab incident, the couple had continued their journey, but tension continued to simmer. Witnesses reported seeing them arguing at multiple locations. On August 27th, something happened at the Spread Creek campsite, an argument that turned fatal. The man who'd always needed to control everything had taken the one thing Gabby valued most, her life. The case that had consumed the nation for over a month finally broke on October 20th, 2021, when the water levels in the Carlton Reserve had receded enough to make previously submerged areas accessible. Brian's parents, Chris and Roberta Laundrie, informed their attorney they intended to search the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park, an area adjacent to the Carlton Reserve where Brian was known to hike. FBI agents and Northport police accompanied them into the preserve that morning. The autumn sun filtered through the cypress trees as they walked along muddy trails, still recovering from weeks of flooding. Chris Laundrie discovered a white bag that contained personal items belonging to his son. Nearby, investigators found a backpack that was unmistakably Brian's. And then, partially submerged in an area that had been underwater during previous searches, they discovered human remains. Dental records would confirm what everyone already suspected. These were Brian Laundrie's remains. Next to the skeletal remains lay a waterlogged notebook, its pages swollen and damaged but still partially legible. When forensic document examiners carefully dried and examined the notebook, they found what amounted to a written confession. In rambling handwriting that grew increasingly erratic across several pages, Brian had admitted to killing Gabby. His version of events painted his actions as a mercy killing, claiming that Gabby had been injured from a fall, was in pain and suffering, and that he'd ended her life because he thought that's what she would have wanted. "I ended her life," he wrote. "I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock." Forensic psychologists and domestic violence experts who later reviewed the confession noted its self-serving narrative, an attempt to frame first-degree murder as a tragic accident followed by a mercy killing. The autopsy evidence completely contradicted Brian's account. There was no indication of a fall or injury that would have caused the suffering he described. What Gabby experienced was manual strangulation, an intimate form of violence that takes significant force and time, anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes of sustained pressure. This was not a mercy killing. This was rage, control taken to its ultimate extreme. The Sarasota County Medical Examiner's Office concluded that Brian had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. A .38 caliber revolver was recovered at the scene. Based on the condition of the remains, forensic experts estimated he died sometime in mid-September, likely within days of entering the reserve, which meant he'd been deceased even as thousands of people searched desperately for him through the swampland for weeks. There would be no trial for Brian Laundrie. The criminal justice system's opportunity to hold him publicly accountable died with him in that Florida swamp, but the evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and complete. The FBI's final investigative update, delivered on January 21, 2022, officially closed the case. The investigation did not identify any other individuals other than Brian Laundrie directly involved in the tragic death of Gabby Petito. Special Agent Schneider announced, while no jury would deliver a verdict, the evidence had convicted Brian in the court of public understanding. His unauthorized use of Gabby's debit card established he'd returned alone and knowingly left her body in the wilderness. The text messages sent from her phone proved his deliberate attempts to deceive her family and buy himself time. The timing of his disappearance into the reserve, just as Gabby's remains were about to be discovered, showed consciousness of guilt. His written confession, despite its self-serving narrative, acknowledged what investigators had already proven. He'd killed her. Gabby's family held a memorial service in Blue Point, New York, where hundreds gathered to celebrate a young woman whose life had been stolen at the threshold of all she'd hoped to achieve. Her father, Joe Petito, spoke through tears about her determination, her creativity, her love for her siblings. She was going to make it, he said. Everyone tried to tell her the influencer dream was too hard, too competitive, but she was going to prove them all wrong, and she would have. In the aftermath of Gabby's death, the Petito and Schmidt families filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Laundrie family, alleging that Brian's parents knew their son had killed Gabby but remained silent while her family desperately searched for answers. That civil case resulted in a settlement, with the Laundrie family paying $3 million. The families also reached a subsequent settlement regarding emotional distress claims. The legal victories, while significant, could never restore what was taken. Today, Brian Laundrie's remains lie buried in a family plot. His story ended by his own hand, his confession the final chapter in a life that spiraled from control into violence. The wilderness, where he took his life, has returned to its natural state. The search teams long gone, the news helicopters departed, leaving only the occasional hiker who might pause and wonder at the tragedy that unfolded in those woods. But this story isn't ultimately about Brian Laundrie, or his inability to accept that Gabby was becoming her own person, pursuing dreams that didn't center him. This is about Gabrielle Venora Petito, who at 22 had the courage to chase an unconventional dream despite everyone's doubts, who lit up rooms with her smile, who braided her little sister's hair every Sunday, who saved every dollar working double shifts to fund her adventure, who believed in creating authentic content that inspired others to explore the world. Gabby's family established the Gabby Petito Foundation, dedicated to providing resources for families searching for missing loved ones and supporting organizations that help victims of domestic violence. Her mother and stepfather have become advocates for recognizing the warning signs of intimate partner violence, speaking at events, and working with legislators to improve how law enforcement responds to domestic incidents. We don't want Gabby to only be remembered as a victim, Nicole Schmidt says. We want her remembered as someone who had dreams, who worked hard, who loved big, and whose story can help save someone else. The foundation has funded search efforts for other missing persons and provided financial assistance to families navigating the nightmare of a missing loved one. Detective Schneider reflects on the case as one of the most extensive missing persons investigations in recent memory, remarkable not just for its tragic outcome, but for how social media and public engagement accelerated the investigative timeline. What made this case solvable was the digital evidence, the surveillance footage, the witnesses who came forward, and yes, the massive public attention that kept tips flowing in. He notes, Gabby's story resonated with people. They saw themselves or their daughters or sisters in her, and they refused to let her disappear without answers. This case serves as a stark reminder that domestic violence doesn't always look like what we expect. It can hide behind Instagram filters and smiling road trip photos. It can masquerade as love while slowly tightening its grip. Gabby tried to escape into adventure, into a dream of freedom on the open road, but she was traveling with the very thing she needed to escape from. The warning signs were there in that Moab police stop, in the text messages she sent begging Brian to speak to her kindly, in the way she'd internalized his criticism and began apologizing for her own dreams. If you or someone you know is experiencing intimate partner violence, control, or abuse, resources are available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline can be reached at 1-800-799-7233 or through their website. The Gabby Petito Foundation offers resources and support at gabbypetitofoundation.org. Gabby's death reminds us that leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time, that control can escalate to lethal violence when an abuser feels their power slipping away. Justice may have been served through the investigation and evidence that proved Brian Laundrie's guilt, but Gabby can never be replaced. She'll never fulfill her dream of becoming a travel influencer, never braid her sister's hair on another Sunday morning, never see another sunrise over a national park she'd worked so hard to visit. Her story must serve as both a memorial and a warning, her light remembered. Not for how it was extinguished, but for how brightly it shone and how many others it can still illuminate through awareness, education, and the foundation that bears her name.